name is Drew, and I'm the Aspiring Master, and welcome to the Aspiring Master Presents. This is a show where we talk about the meanings, misunderstandings, and insights about the important words we use and misuse on a daily basis. Really understanding what we're truly meaning when we talk allows us to convey and explain ourselves better to others. This not only allows us clearer communication so we can get what we need quicker and with less stress, but also helps us understand ourselves in more depth than we thought possible. Today on our show, we have our special guest, Therese Wilson, who, like myself, is a practitioner, instructor, and advocate for personal growth and cooperative awareness. Today on our show, we're going to be talking about the word selfish. So let's get to it. Let me go into our Merriam-Webster dictionary and take a look at what they call selfish. So in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, we got selfish, concerned excessively or exclusively with oneself, seeking or concentrating on one's own advantage, pleasure, or well-being without regard for others. Okay, so that's the first definition. The second definition is arising from concern with one's own welfare or advantage in disregard of others. So selfish in the dictionary definition is actually kind of a swear word, if we look at it that way, right? So it's like, you're being selfish, right?
Yeah.
Is basically saying you're not having regard for others.
Yeah, and that's where I'm not necessarily going to disagree with the definition, but that's when we get to the other side of the give and the givee, the giver and the givee.
Yeah.
Givee, and there's the word we used last week. If the givee, the givee has an expectation that the giver is going to give to you and calls the giver selfish for not giving, then the whole thing is tainted because it isn't allowing the giver to give freely. There's an expectation attached to it. Well, so the selfishness doesn't necessarily reside with the person who didn't give. The selfishness could reside with the person who expected to be given to and doesn't get it.
Right. I actually came up with a definition a long time ago for selfish, which is one of my favorite things to quote is selfish is what somebody calls you when you don't want to give what they want to have.
What they want you to give. Yeah. A lot of time.
Yep. Well, now, having said that, like in accordance to the dictionary definition, they on some levels are using it correctly, but incorrectly.
Like I said, I won't disagree with it entirely. But if you're not going to the other words in the English language that get thrown in the mix that taint that definition, then.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's the thing: when we're talking about selfishness, we're taking a look at it subjectively. So what you're saying, and this is the one that I experience the most out there, is that whole idea that if you're not giving what I want you to give me, you're being selfish. If you're not sharing, right? Like, I mean, when we're talking about children, and we learn this quite early, is that, you know, if you've got a piece of pie, something that other people desire, right, and you don't share it with another child, then that child, well, you're just being selfish, right? Because again, it's I don't want to give what you want to have. And so we'll use this term of saying that you're selfish. But here's the thing. What is the welfare of the rest, right? Like, I mean, when you're not giving something, that doesn't necessarily mean you're selfish, really.
No.
It could mean that you're looking out for your own personal self-interest in the moment. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It could be that there's a scarcity of this product that you have in your life and you're not sharing it for that specific reason. There's a scarcity. And
yeah, my mother always said, you know, if you're out in public, even if it's something as simple as a piece of gum, if you don't have enough to share with everyone, don't pull it out.
Right. Exactly. Well, and here that makes me go, what are we teaching our kids when we say that? Because we also have to say you have to stand up for your own self and understanding, right?
Yeah, and that gets me very quickly to something I feel very strongly about.
Hmm.
Um, People, women in particular, are taught that we have to give, 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 that it is selfish to not give. And so we get to the point in our existence where we are giving so much that we're giving from our lack instead of our fullness. And when we get to that point, people keep demanding more and more from us because they know that they're not getting all that they could. Innately, they know this. And so it just perpetuates this cycle when women, people have to learn that to take care of yourself is not selfish.
Well, yeah.
And that's where you're talking about self-care, being able to step away, being able to say no, being able to walk away without even having to explain it. If people are at that point where they're demanding that much from you, again, they are the ones who are being selfish by not allowing you to fill yourself again. Because the only way that we give well is to have something to give. So we are actually not being selfish because we are filling ourselves so that we can give to others better.
Yeah. Well, and again, here's where we get that mix up, right? There is when you're gifting something to somebody, say where you're sharing a piece of pie or all of that, right? I can understand that as an adult, teaching your child to be able to share if they have an abundance of. You know what I'm saying? If you have an abundance of something and you are definitely, not going to eat it, sharing is a good thing, right? One, because you're incurring future sharing with yourself. So when you're doing it, you're actually padding your bottom line for the future. And this isn't something that we're thinking about as kids, but in a realistic sense, you are padding your bottom line for the future. You're creating a being, a person that understands that I am going to give this to this person and way in the future and maybe never, right? Like, I mean, it's definitely a possibly never, but you open up a possibility of that by
I,
sharing, right?
I'm going to say it's not even a never. It's
Mm,
just you can't expect it to come back exactly as you gave it, but the intention, the energy of it. And I think it's example. I have a neighbor, my next door neighbor, who's a flight attendant, and she's a senior crew member, and because she's close to my age, and she has spent her career giving to other people. She has spent her life giving to her family, giving to her significant other, and now she is in need of receiving, and she doesn't know how to receive. And I had a talk with her that I hope helped, and said, there is really something to this. What you give is what you get. And please consider that you have given all of your life, and now is not the time to be embarrassed about receiving the different things that she finds embarrassing. And I just say, well, for heaven's sakes, your husband wants to give these things to you.
mhm.
Don't deny him the joy of giving. Did you not have joy in giving? Well, yeah, don't deny him that joy.
Right. And I think that statement or what you're talking about really comes from the whole culture that we have about teaching people about selfishness. You need to give and give and give, and like you said, a stereotype for women is that you continually give. You work at doing the laundry, you work at raising the kids. Like, I mean, this is the sort of 50s ideal,
Yes,
right?
it's not gone. You support your husband's dreams. All those different things. Yeah, and when you don't, in our culture, still, a woman is domineering. She's a bitch. She's whatever.
Mhm.
And whereas a man would be focused and driven, and all these different things, very different terms for exactly the same behavior.
Right, of course. Well, I mean, and yes, when we get into the stereotypes that we have about men and women, and I mean, we can
Yeah,
actually go from there to stereotypes of everybody. Um,
exactly.
stereotypes of short people, stereotypes of tall people, like
And just to be very clear, um, I think the mistake that people make regarding the women's movement, the Me Too movement, the whatever movement, is that uh, and some are, of course, but the fundamental intention of any of it is not to diminish men. In fact, I have a firm belief that men um, are just carrying way too many burdens that they don't have to because they haven't been taught culturally that it's okay to let a woman share those burdens. Um, so it's about raising women up, not lowering men.
right.
And, and
Well,
and that's what gets missed in all of these equality movements is what does equality really mean?
when we're talking about selfishness, we can't talk about selfishness without talking about selflessness. Oh, having no concern for self or unselfish, right? That's what selfless says. Selfless says in the dictionary. Now, there's a whole bunch to unpack there because if selflessness is the opposite of selfishness, if you're and we were talking about women and the stereotypes, women are supposed to be what?
Selfless.
Selfless, right? They're not supposed to have a self, really. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
it's all about their
And
family. It's all about
that's
their
where we
husband.
get wrapped up in the stereotypes again. We're supposed to be our self is supposed to be identified with being a mother, being a wife, being in fact, um, we moved a lot. And when I moved to Corpus Christi, I actually went to a welcome to our city little women's thing, women's luncheon, and we were asked to stand up and introduce ourselves. And all the women before me talked about, hi, I'm so and so, and my husband does, and my children, and da 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 da.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting there going, when my turn came, I said, hello, my name is Therese Wilson. I have a husband. I have some children. Now
Mhm.
let me tell you about me.
Yeah.
I never got invited back.
Oh no, I'm sure you didn't. Um, uh, when so selfish, and this is where I think we jump from one extreme to the other. I think that we don't talk enough about understanding how to share because sharing is all a part of this.
Yeah.
And gifts, sharing and gifts are all a part of this because when you don't give something to somebody that they want, they tend to call you selfish. If you are unwilling to be able to share something that you feel internally, and I think that this is really a key point here, that we feel internally that we are having a lack of, right? Um, that we tend not to share that, right? Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It just we have a feeling that we have a lack of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So sharing that with other people is a really tough thing. And so if somebody who wants that thing that you have, that they see that you have, they perceive that you have an overabundance of, and you don't want to share that because of your own sense of lack, um, that you are labeled, selfish. You
Oh, sure, sure. My mother grew up very, very poor, and so when in later life, it was the small things that it showed up that she just flat refused to share. Uh, but they were absolute triggers from from her childhood. Um, I could tell a little story, but that's okay. No, but I get completely what you're saying. Unless we consciously worked, we're going to probably come up to this in every program. Unless we consciously look at what is triggering that particular behavior, it's not really going to change.
Well, and again, should the understanding really has to come from both sides. And the cool thing about it is if you have been enlightened about it or you're conscious of it, you can take a look at what somebody else is doing, understand that the reason that you're feeling disgruntled is that you want something that they have that you feel that they've got in abundance and they should be sharing with you. Again, that expectation of being gifted with or given to by another person. And but if you understand that about yourself and you understand also that the person that you are talking to may see it in a completely different light, like you said, they survived the depression and so they hoard a little bit, or and so they don't share as much. There's two things that can come from that. Obviously, is that there are people that give too much later when they have lots of abundance. They just give everything away, um, and then there's the balance. So when we're talking about understanding selfish and how we use it, being conscious of how you use the word is part of the battle, because then you can start forgiving people for being
And
what you are talking about.
yeah, but calling someone, using it like you're saying, using the word selfish as a curse word, is also a way of controlling and creating guilt.
Hmm.
And that shows up in a lot of ways in the male female dynamic, but it shows up a lot. And this is part of where the Me Too movement kicks in. It shows up a lot when it comes to sexual interactions between men and women.
Wouldn't it be cool if we could just remove that from the language and really clarify in different ways, right? And it's one thing to say, I feel like you're being selfish, but I understand that that's probably just me, right? Like, I mean, by using the word, you're being the word,
Mm.
right? And here, I'm going to give you an example. And actually, I don't even have to look it up. Um, I have I have definitely been pedantic in my life. And for those people that don't know what pedantic is, it's excessive use of knowledge. Okay. So be just using the word makes you the word, right? And I think that in this case, if we use the word selfish, and especially in the manner that we're talking about right now, like you're just selfish, um, that you are literally being what the word is describing while you're using it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
Because those guys had no interest in anything except themselves in that moment.
yeah, of course. Well, and I mean, and again, so here we are at that crossroads of understanding that we are so unconscious about our motives and our motivations
Yeah.
that we will utilize those tools, because they're just words are tools to be able to get what we want, right? So we utilize those tools in an unconscious manner. So those guys that were after ya, right, were utilizing the best techniques that they knew how. But I don't in any regard, like, I mean, there's some of them probably that understood consciously what was going on, but most of the time, because like I said, from little kids we were taught, like our parents manipulated us with the word, don't be selfish, you share that with your
Yeah,
sister, like
and
it's
of course that's where we always have to come back to as well. What are we teaching our children? How are we teaching our children?
right.
How can we do it differently? So, um, for me, uh, the best way to do it in a different way is simply to example better
Hmm.
with our children, and give them choices, even when they're in the middle of being selfish. Uh, when they're old enough, of course, to understand and explain on their level, give them the choice. Say, so and so will be sad if you don't, but it's also okay if you don't. And give them the choice. Tell them, explain what the repercussions of not sharing might be,
Hmm.
uh, if there are, and that kind of thing. Instead of share, do it. You're a bad person. You're a bad person if you don't. Because sharing has always got to be a personal yes choice for it to have any real positive energy attached
Right.
to it.
Well, and like you said, it's like trying to figure out how to be able to acclimatize children to
Yeah.
a world, right?
Yeah, and how do you do it? There's no perfect way,
No.
but but at least throw some of these different things in the mix.
Well, I think that self-consciousness is our key. That's again what we're trying to sell. We're trying to sell. We're trying to share. Um, we're trying to share that kind of self-knowledge in order to be able to get people to the point of being conscious of really what they're doing and the consequences of what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Calling somebody selfish, like I said, is actually really a selfish act because you're trying to manipulate behavior, right?
Yeah, and if you can't do it in the moment, the best way for me to evaluate whether or not I was doing something that was really good for me in so many ways, spiritually, physically, is just to take a minute if I can and think about literally how I felt. Close my eyes and reimagine that moment. And just like with my grandsons, where did I feel something? If I felt light and bright and could breathe well, then it was a choice that resonates well with me. But if I can feel that little or that little, something in my body tightening when I did it, I need to think again.
So, what is it like? I mean, selfish is a word we know basically that says you're pleasing yourself, but I think that it really depicts more of an in the moment pleasure thing. It doesn't really have anything to do with the future. It has to do with right now. Um, if you're being truly selfish, like I mean, if you're following the definition of the word, not that somebody called you that, but that is just what you are being in that moment. It would be I'm just after a pleasure. So let's take a look at it this way. And I know this is going to be sort of an inflammatory thing, but it really illustrates the point. Is that if you steal something from a store, right? That would be, I would say, that would be a selfish act. I want that candy. I don't have any money. I want it now. It's mine. I'm going to take it. Okay, whatever that is. And I think that the same thing happens when we just go up in scale with murder, rape. All of those things are a pleasure now thing that says I'm going to get it because I want it now, and I think that those are selfish acts.
Well, yes and no. They're
Okay.
absolutely selfish acts.
Mhm.
Yes. Um, but um, Neil Donald Walsh and his Conversations with God books say that every act is an act of love. What did these people love so much that they had to get it? And that doesn't mean that it's not distorted love. It's not mature love. It's not love that operates in the world on any high level. But these people, at beginning with the little damage that creates the child wanting to steal the candy to get it because he loves candy and it makes him feel good, up to murder, there's something so damaged in them that they are trying to fill it, which is that act of trying to fill it is the act of love with something that we would consider horrific.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that it is acceptable in any way, but it can be understood. And if we can understand how the little damages turn into the large damage, then we can begin to uncreate it in our world as well. But it is all an act of love in some way.
Right.
And I understand it. A lot of people may not, but it's how do we turn distorted love into love?
Right. Well, I'm going to phrase this another way because I think that in that conversation, that's a conversation that needs a lot of explaining for somebody to really get it, right? And seriously, I'm not belittling it. I understand it personally.
And I get that we're just throwing things out here,
Yeah.
and I hope people who may be listening understand that we're throwing this out. And if you do want to know more, start searching like Neil Donald Walsh and that kind of thing. But
Right.
The idea is out there.
Mm-hmm. And so even like I said, even though I understand what it is that you're talking about, what I want to do is I want to explain it down in a way that nobody does, and this is another Neil Donald Walshism actually. Nobody does anything that they think is wrong. Okay, so in their minds, they really think what they're doing is correct.
Nobody does anything wrong given their model
of the world, right?
Or given their model of the world.
Right. So, when those guys are doing those things in that moment, or, as doing the selfish act that we're talking about, I say guys because I'm stereotyping here. It's not really just that. It's anybody that does it. They're practicing a selfish act, and for whatever reason, whether that's damage in childhood or even brain damage can happen. In that moment, that is the thing that they feel that they need. And like you said, I'm going to take it that one step further, is they're trying to fill something they feel that they're lacking in that moment, right? Mm-hmm. So that lack, right, is something that is like a hunger. And when you're trying to fill that on a selfish level, you're only thinking about the moment now for whatever reason. I'm only thinking about filling that in this moment because that's what I need right now. Now, pulling back from that, when I say that's I'm talking about that's a selfish act. That's what I would consider a selfish act based on the dictionary definition. When you look at it in a broader sense, because we all have our own self-fulfillment, I think in some way, our self-fulfillment is always there. We're always trying to fulfill ourselves, right? For the more aware people, they understand that sharing, they understand that sharing, caring, love expression, all of those positive things create connections in their lives that create a network that works better at fulfillment in the future. Now, some people are taught that as kids, and so it's an unconscious thing. They just were always taught to do that, and so they do that, and it works. That system works. So what we're doing is we're looking at our self-interest way in the future as opposed to just now. And I think that when I break it down from selfish to self-fulfillment, I guess, maybe would probably be the better way of putting it. The difference between selfish and self-fulfillment is selfish does not take any account of the future, whereas self-fulfillment does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, selfish isn't building on anything for the future. Self-fulfillment is, yeah. I
right. Agree. Okay. And I think that we really have to transfer the understanding of what selfish is to self-fulfillment and sort of build a bridge on how to be able to do that. Now,
because truthfully, if you don't know what it's like to be selfish, you don't really know the feeling of giving and selflessness either.
I hear people toting that they want to become masters or to become spiritually enlightened, as they put it, a lot. And I ended up getting into a discussion with somebody about that whole idea. I said the truth that I see is most people don't. Most people just want to alleviate what pain they're already feeling, and so they figure that here's another way to be able to try and do that, to alleviate the internal pain or the perceived pain that they have. And so on that level, they start doing work, whether it's Reiki work, whether it's meditation work, whether it's a whole bunch of other stuff, they start undertaking it. But what they don't realize is that they're doing it from a premise, an ego premise, which means I want to stop hurting. And so their intention is to stop hurting, not to grow, not to walk through the fire. They just want to alleviate the pain. And so anything painful is perceived as wrong or bad.
I'm going to get back to selflessness, because selflessness is a real bugbear with me. It's a word that I think should be, like at least, I don't know, expunged, because the connotation of selfless is a really, really bad one. and I know that religions use that to be selfless is giving. They have a definition of what selflessness is. But again, I think that there is no giving and there is no sharing without a self. And
I agree. And self-sacrifice as a demand, and not as, again, something that we have chosen to give. I would give my life for my children. Absolutely. But there are other things in that I would, and no one has to demand it of me, but there are things that people are going to demand of me. I'm going, no, I don't have to be that selfless.
Right.
No.
Well, and again, we get back to that whole instruction of you must give away.
Well, and I'm going to jump in a little bit.
Sure.
We are so misusing selflessness and calling people selfish in so many ways.
Right.
Beginning with demanding that our young people fight our wars. And if they, avoid, like in Vietnam, if they avoided the graft and went to your lovely country, Canada, they were selfish. When someone was demanding that they die for something they didn't believe in, who's the selfish? And it's over and over in our lives, in our world. We demand something of someone else and call them selfish for not giving it. That was absolutely harmful to that other person. Police officers, firefighters, and some of them are giving because they want to, and others now are kind of trapped in the role and being asked to do things they should never be asked to do. And they think they're doing it because we want them to, and we will call them selfish if they don't. Oh, it just breaks my heart so many times seeing what's going on. And then we wonder why things get so out of whack and police start doing things that are probably contrary to who they know themselves to be even. And how did they ever get to that spot? I'm glad we're examining selfish, because we are calling people selfish for doing things that are totally against their native nature as human beings.
Right. Well, and I totally agree. I think that these words are really important words to understand, right? Otherwise, why would we be talking about them? Right? But no, they are. This is a huge subject. Again, being manipulated by the swear word that we call selfish, but also being manipulated by selfless and the connotations of you are a good person if you're selfless. And again, there's a huge misunderstanding of this. You cannot give anything if you don't have a self. If you are not fulfilled, okay, seriously, and this is my understanding, just based on me, based on the people that I talk to and deal with, and the people that I see, the people that I counsel, they are so unself-fulfilled that they just keep giving their stuff away, because if they don't, they're going to be called selfish. They're going to be belittled. All of that stuff. If you're not given what I want, you're bad.
Yeah.
And society itself, really, like you said, we've got these roles that people fall into. We fall into these stereotypes, and this we can spread from here and go into racism. We can go into bigotry of any kind. That just stems from this whole concept of, oh, well, you're selfish and you must be selfless. And even though I understand the underlying premise to it, and I even agree with it a little bit, right? It's like, yeah, it is a really good thing to be able to be giving and sharing, right? And we'll go into giving and sharing in a second because that's a really important key here. It is important to be able to do those things, but not for the reasons that we've been teaching people. The reasons that it is good is because in a social construct that we have, in the social, like, I mean, you and I, let's just take this as an example. You and I are sharing and giving, right? But we are sharing and giving from a place of fulfilled abundance. And because of that, the sharing and giving comes from a really, really positive place, a positive place of, you and I sharing because we really enjoy each other's company. We really respect the other person's experience so that when you have something to say, I'm listening. And if it's something that I didn't know, now I've got it. So
because I'm smarter than you.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that you are. But we're not comparing that now.
Okay, maybe I'm older than you.
I think you're more experienced than I am.
More experience. Well, thank you for sharing that way of looking at it. Thank you.
Just more experienced. All right. But yeah, we are. We're sharing and giving from a place of what we would consider abundance. Okay. That we have that place in us, that we now have the opportunity to be able to share this, whether it's our time, whether it's our energy, whatever that is, we are sharing it, right? And it's something that can move into the world on a positive level. Now, if you were taught as a kid, well, no, you just got to give up that piece of pie, right? And again, stereotypically, women do this all the time. They're supposed to sacrifice everything for the family and the man. And that old stereotype is and they become these will-o'-the-wisps. They become what I would consider selfless. They don't have any sense of self. They have nothing that isn't the things that they do, or the things that their husband does, or their kids do. They become this ghost of a being.
Yeah, and in truth, it's when you have a true sense of self, that when from that comes selflessness in an act, that act is so much more powerful.
Well, and I think that we all recognize when that happens. It's sort of like, when somebody gives you something, right? Said, hey, I noticed that you need some of this, and here, have some of that. And that person and they just walk away, and it's not a big deal. It's just like, here's that for you. There is there is a gratitude that wells from that doesn't well from somebody that is giving you something because they have to. Because you can tell, right?
Sure.
Yeah, you can tell. And it's no different than, now, unless, there's going to be a caveat here, unless you are somebody that has done it so long, people can't tell that it's no longer begrudging, right? It's sort of like the housewife that has to sacrifice her meal in order to get everybody else fed, right? And she can't eat because she's up getting things for everybody and doing everything. And by the time she's done,
I always demanded that nobody ate till I sat down.
Yeah, exactly. And so I can have a hot meal, right? Yeah. But you don't have a hot meal, your meal's, and then by the time you're done, you're just not feeling like you're wanting to eat. Now, so when you're in that scenario and you've been doing it for so long, it becomes such second nature that you're not even thinking about it anymore. So therefore, it's tough for people to see, really tough for people to see that it's something that you're doing really on a begrudging level. You've just resigned yourself to it, right? That's the way the world works.
I had a method of being selfless and selfish at the same time.
Oh, cool. Sure.
And it got illustrated. I'm hypoglycemic, so getting close to dinner time, I'm going to start getting snappy. And then, of course, you add into it PMS and whatever else, at certain times in the month, and just plain old tired. My family all knew that I was going to cook that dinner. I'm good at it. I make good quick meals, and I like doing it. But if they came into the kitchen, Mom, da, 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 all I had to do was lift a finger. And they go, okay, and they'd walk away.
Yeah.
So I got to continue to being selfless,
Mm-hmm.
but selfish.
Right.
I don't want to kill you. I don't want to end up in prison because of this.
and let me tell you, I might if you keep
And
bugging
I'm
me. Well, I mean, but there's that when somebody's doing it begrudgingly.
Yes,
Okay.
of course. And,
If-
and
if-
that's what I'm talking about. When you're giving from your place of lack, that's when the begrudgingly comes through.
That I think that you brought it up. It's a really good word. I think that if you are truly giving, if you are truly sharing, I call it sharing personally,
Yeah.
because now here's give and share that we'll talk about in a sec. But if you're truly giving or sharing, there's a joy to it.
Yes.
Okay, there's when you're doing it, there's just like, I'm so glad I can. I'll give you an example. The other day, it's my buddy. I'm selling a video card. Okay, this welcome to Techie Drew, a video card for a computer, and it's a really good one. It's an older one, but it's still a really good one. And I had bought one for my buddy's son. And it was the same one because I couldn't find mine because I used to have this great video card because it was my older one. And it's just like, I couldn't find, I'll just buy them one for Christmas and their new housewarming. So I bought them that one. And he said, I can give you money for it. Nah, it's okay. Right. It's not a problem. I'm abundant right now. So I like giving. And so the other day he came over and I showed him, I said, I found that other card. It's right here. And then he called me the next day. He says, how much are you selling that card for? Because I had it on for sale. And I said, well, why are you asking? Who are you thinking for? And he says, well, his daughter, Sam, right, has an old video card and this would be a massive upgrade for her. And she's really into computers and computer gaming and stuff. And I'm like, well, it's for her. No problem. It's just come and get it, right? It's like, it's not. I'm selling it to just pad my bottom line. It's it's not that I need it. It's just that I want to be able to
Right.
look at the future. And I said, but you're my friend. Like, I mean, why would I can't charge friends, right? I just it doesn't feel right to me. So he comes over and he says, well, I can put money for it. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's my old card. I've already used it. It's good. Now I'm just giving it. And there's a sense of joy in me that I am capable of doing that at this point. That I have an overabundance enough that I can do that for the people that are close to me. Right. And that kind of giving is, I'm not sitting there going, I wonder what they're going to be doing with it, or they could throw it in the garbage. It
Right.
is as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and if the joy is gone, I too have had to do things. Okay, like for the homeowners association, some of the events. I admit that there were times I was a little perturbed because the volunteers didn't show up and all that kind of stuff. And my joy was starting to run low. But then getting into the event, even though I am working my behind off, seeing the little kids, seeing the people who just showed up, who are appreciative and at the last minute join in, I am bone tired, but my joy is certainly still there. And it's primarily because of the other human interactions that I had. I'm no longer giving because someone's demanding it. I'm giving because I can see, not just, I can feel my joy and see the joy that I have created.
It's never a question, and again, we'll get back to that whole idea. The reason that people do things is because in that moment, that's how they are. They may not be that way normally. They may be in that space for only that
and
evening,
it is
right?
actually a supreme act of selfishness for me to not automatically go to the thought that that person who is being, contrary in any way doesn't have a reason. It's all about me in that moment.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think that when we're talking about selfish, you can't get away from the fact that if you take something personally, then what you're saying is it's all about me. You're
Yeah.
not thinking about them. You're not thinking about anybody else. You're only thinking about what you feel right now, and it must be, right? And
unless I'm somehow actually in physical danger, then I'm going to react, and but
well, I mean, and let's just go to, because what the thing that appeared in my mind while you were saying that was road rage. And road rage is a supremely selfish act. It's saying that person is doing it to you personally, and you take it so as if that person in front of you or beside you or accidentally cut you off or whatever did that to you, as opposed to did that in front of you, right? So, and therein lies that whole selfishness, right? Now, I wanted to talk about giving and sharing, and we have a lot of this, and this ties in a lot with selflessness, and what they teach about it. And I've talked to a number of religious people, and selflessness is a big thing in religion. It's about sacrificing for the greater good, right? Is sacrificing yourself for the greater good. And my argument has always been with that it's like, well, wait a minute, how can you possibly give anything from a place of nothing? There's nothing to give if you don't have a grounding. So I mean, selflessness seems kind of silly to me. You can't give and you can't share.
Selflessness is a means of control.
I think that it has been used. I understand the premise, right? Like, I mean, seriously, I understand the underlying idea. The underlying idea is a good one, right? Yeah. I think that being, in the way that I think they were originally trying to mean it, selflessness was being able to say that I can give, right?
It means, and I think I agree. I was being a little flip there. Selflessness means being able to put aside your ego, because there's good ego that is tells you who you intrinsically are. I am a good person, and there's selfish ego. There's bad ego. So being able to put aside the ego that says that you are the center of the universe, and that your needs supersede all others, is a good thing. But we need that selfish ego in order to identify ourselves as having the ability to choose between the two and choose to give selflessly,
right?
If you will.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think that the underlying premise that they were really trying to promote by using the word selfless was a good idea. But I think that we've lost it along the way. And I think that because we use selfless as the really polar opposite to selfish, it's really, really a dangerous word. And like you said, I think that it's being used to manipulate to a great degree.
To recruit soldiers, to recruit religious acolytes, to recruit.
I think that there is definitely that. And I also think that it was designed to get a fairly egocentric populace to work on being less egocentric, right? So it's absolutely, but then if used by an egocentric personality, it can become a tool to manipulate.
Taken to an extreme, we have Jonestown.
Right. Jonestown. So describe that to me because it doesn't hit a reference to me.
Okay, Jonestown was what's his name, Jones, who moved to Guyana, and when his scheme, his cult was really found out, they all literally drank the Kool-Aid.
Drank the Kool-Aid. Okay, so it's the Kool-Aid guy, right? Got it.
And there was just a handful of survivors, young children mostly.
The connotation of selfless that correlates to giving and sharing. Now, I've talked to a number of religious people, and we talked about giving and sharing, and their idea of giving is, oh, I must give, like, and again, giving at all, right? It's like, oh, well, no, you always help your neighbor, you always. There's something to be said to that if we lived in a society that is capable of it, right? So where we are all sharing to that degree.
It's
Because
a different level of consciousness.
yeah, exactly. It's there's something to be said about it, because then everybody's giving and there is abundance and there is no lack. But because we live in a society that is centered on lack, okay? Because if you don't have enough money, you're living on the streets. Right? If you don't have enough mental powers to be able to create that money, you're living on the street, or somebody has to take care of you. Or, we're living in that kind of society where giving is a begrudging thing. It really is.
And we look at corporate profits and say that's just showing how capitalism works, but it's somehow not selfish of them and the bazillionaires to hold all these profits in a bank and do nothing with them except make more money. That's not selfish, but we are selfish for not sharing our little bit with our neighbors.
Right. Well, and that rightly, right, part of exactly what I'm saying is that we live in a world where, despite the fact that we would love to have no lack, we do.
No, we have lack. The world has no lack.
No, I agree.
Our cultural construct creates our lack.
I know, I agree.
The world has no lack. We just don't want to share it properly.
Yeah, exactly. So the point being, because we live in this society, that idea of selflessness doesn't work. It just doesn't work for the construct that we're living in right now. In a utopian future, that construct works great, being able to give all that you have because you have no lack. There is no lack. But again, in our society right now, we have to get to a point where we don't have lack in order to really be able to give and share. We can't really give and share until we are self-fulfilled. Once we have that fulfillment, then we have now we've got an overabundance. We have what is it called? You're at that cusp, right? So you have that bubble of water that's over the rim. That's what they call a cusp. And so you are absolutely can give that. You can even give a little bit more because we got a full glass. We're good. But once you get down to a certain point, you say, okay, now I've got to stop. I got to stop giving and refill to make sure that that's there. But purely physically and emotionally, really, physically, emotionally, and mentally at this point in our society, I think that self-fulfillment, which is different than selfishness, in the fact that it is really it's the term that comes to my mind is padding our bottom line. I don't know why, but is really going, I'm safe. And when you're safe, and it's like, I'm safe now, I've got this. And then it's like, oh, I've got a bunch more, right? Now, if you came from like your mom coming through the depression, she may hoard that, right? So on a certain level, you can say that's a selfishness, but it's a mental thing because of your experience. But you can say, now I have this, and now I have an abundance of this. of course I'll give,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Of course I will share.
And that's not to say, please, that my mother did not share. She did
No,
a lot,
no.
but there were certain things.
Well, and of course, and again, sharing has to do with the person sharing it. Now, the difference between sharing, well, no, it's not even a difference. The sharing and giving have a couple of really bad connotations here because if you give on a begrudging level, it becomes a transaction. Remember?
Yeah.
We're talking about, and a lot of the times, if you are feeling lack and you're giving from a place of feeling lack, you will have strings attached to that gift,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So when I give you something, so here you go, Therese, you can have this, and then I come over to your place, say at Christmas, like, where's that thing that I gave you? Why isn't it out there, right? Or why aren't you wearing it? Or you know what I'm saying? So it was a gift that wasn't really a gift. It was just something that I gave you that was a transaction. You should be doing something with it.
Right.
And I don't know if I
and I think that might lead to, you use the word abundance several times.
Mhm.
We have to reevaluate what we have in abundance as well. We generally go to things for sharing. I realized a long time ago that the thing that I had in abundance to share was simply time and presence.
Yeah, well, I mean, I give because it makes me feel great to give. It really does. And it also makes me feel great to be able to say that I give this to you, throw it away if you want. This is me just sharing, and I want to make this absolutely clear. This is me sharing my good feeling that I have about you.
About you, yes.
And that's it. That's all the gift represents. It's nothing more than that. And so when I'm giving, I give from that space, as opposed to a space of I need to get something back, or I need acceptance from other people. Here's another thing that we do with giving, is we will take it and we'll say, "Here's my heart," right? And if they go, "Oh, thanks," and they just shove it off to the side, you're devastated because what you were looking for was approval. You were looking for something to validate self, and gifts and sharing doesn't come from that space, not really. So in this one, selflessness, we went to that place and discussed selflessness, and I think that selfless has been used incorrectly. I think that we don't want to be selfless. We want to be self-full and giving. Right? Self-full and giving. That's what a lot of people are trying to use selfless or trying to define selfless as. It really isn't that. I think that we want to get to that in-between space of self-fulfillment that gives us a place of abundance to be able to give and share. And in giving and sharing, we actually support ourselves. Again, like your neighbor. It's like we've given and shared all the time, that later on somebody can give and share with us, and being able to receive that giving and sharing is really important, as well as being able to do it. And I think that you can receive it if you're full as well.
I agree.
Okay. I think that's it. Does that sound like a good summary?
Good enough.
All right. Good enough. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here on the Aspiring Master Presents and talking with Therese and I about selfish. We'll see you next time. Ta-da!